We told you a few weeks ago that some of the protesters at the Capitol building in Washington on January 6th appear to have been working with the FBI in secret, and that some of them may have encouraged protesters to break the law that day. We're not saying the entire thing was orchestrated by the FBI, but is it possible that some of the people there were actually reporting to the FBI and that they encouraged, as we said, others to commit crimes? But as it turns out, we were right to ask those questions, and tonight we'll show you why.
New court documents unsealed this week are revealing details about what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. And, those details, the truth about them varies depending on what news outlet you get your information from. So we're going to start with a clip from Tucker Carlson at Fox News, deciphering these details, and then we're going to work our way back to the truth. Tucker Carlson has tried to spin things in regards to an ex-DEA agent who was at the Capitol during the attack, who had his gun with him, and who was also with other federal agents. He's spinning this information. Listen to the way Tucker Carlson talks about this ex-DEA agent. And then Ben and I are going to break down more about those new court documents and how what's in those court documents isn't adding up to the narrative that Tucker Carlson is sharing here. Take a listen.
We told you a few weeks ago that some of the protesters at the Capitol building in Washington on January 6th appear to have been working with the FBI in secret, and that some of them may have encouraged protesters to break the law that day. We'd seen evidence in court documents suggesting that it happened. We're also aware of several other well-documented cases that appeared in the press in which the FBI effectively orchestrated crimes for which Americans were ultimately arrested and imprisoned. That very thing just happened in the state of Michigan right before the last election. The much publicized attempt to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer was not at all what it seemed to be. As we've now learned, according to an account in BuzzFeed News, the majority of the so-called plotters in that case were in fact reporting to the FBI. There's a name for that. It was a setup. Did anything similar happen on January 6th? We're not saying the entire thing was orchestrated by the FBI, but is it possible that some of the people there were actually reporting to the FBI? But as it turns out, we were right to ask those questions, and tonight we'll show you why.
Ben, Tucker Carlson is insinuating some very dangerous ideas here. And a lot of them do not align with the actual facts that we read in these new court documents that were released this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at these clips and listening to Tucker Carlson. And I just want everyone to see exactly how much of a propagandist he is. That is a entire range of talent for Tucker Carlson, because he cannot engage in fact. He cannot engage in truth. And so he makes up lies and he distorts the truth. That's all he does. That's who he is.
Yeah, and it is leading to the erosion of our media industry. It's leading to the erosion of trust in media because his commentary, I think, about the FBI and the DEA being involved in the January 6th attack is very dangerous, because he presented it in a way where it's almost like a setup. He gave an example of a situation that he concluded was a setup. And then he said, is that what happened on January 6th? And so again, here we're seeing an individual who is trying to evade the accountability of those who were responsible for what happened on January 6th, which ultimately led to the death of 5 people. And although 540 people are facing charges, none of them are facing any manslaughter or murder charges. Not only are we, looking at this attack as patriots who are trying to save America, but now we're saying that the government orchestrated it themselves.
Right.
And if they did, let's be clear that the government was still under Trump's orders.
Right.
Yeah. And the caucasity that Carlson has to actually have Mark Ibram on his show, the former DEA agent who is accused of being a part of this scheme. He had the caucasity to have the guy on his show. But what Mark had to say didn't quite line up with the framing that Tucker Carlson presented. Take a listen.
I just want to be very clear about one thing. The man who invited you to this event is a longtime FBI informant. He's confirmed that to us. While you were there, and I want to be clear on this, he encouraged you to breach the Capitol. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Both him and I were seeking to protect the public that day. We went there with the intention of seeking those who wish to do our government harm, to stop them, and to protect those who peacefully protest. I walked up to the FBI SWAT team and I offered assistance to them. I was carrying my firearm because I was a credentialed DEA agent. I'm expected to. I don't think the informant that I brought to the rally that day was malicious or trying to entrap me in any way, shape, or form. I think we were just trying to do the best we could with what we had. It was chaos.
The FBI knew he was there. Now, he says he was not working at their direction, but he concedes they knew he was there, and we'll let our viewers reach their own conclusions. Do you believe there were many other people in the crowd that day who had been in contact with the FBI?
Not that I've seen. But again, I went there with the intention to protect the public.
Protect the public from what? protect the public from Biden getting into office, or
Exactly.
protect the public from the insurrectionists who you actively participated in storming the Capitol with? Like, what were you trying to protect the Capitol from? And so this guy is so vague that you can see Carlson trying to manipulate the conversation here to get it to fit into his framing. He's so vague. And also he is facing 15 years. So those court documents that were revealed this week were from prosecutors who are trying to pin charges on him. But let's be clear, we never heard him say that he was under direct orders from the FBI. He said, I approached the FBI task force and asked them if they needed help. He never said that they asked him for his help.
Right.
And so to try to frame this all and say that January 6th was an orchestrated attack by the FBI or the DEA is absolutely absurd. We're hearing from a former DEA agent here who said he was there. But let's be clear, what you do professionally in your 9 to 5 has your bosses are not dictating what you're doing when you're off of work between 5 and 9. And so he was off of work. He was not under direct report. And so you cannot sit here and say just because people who worked as a DEA agent, because people who are working for the FBI were there, does not mean that those agencies orchestrated this attack. There's no evidence to support that connection.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you breaking it down at that very first part the way you did, because do you notice how when Tucker Carlson and his guests don't go precisely according to a narrative that they prepared beforehand, that Tucker Carlson loses all of his communication skills, and he had to jump in there at the very last second of what that officer was talking about and say, well, we're going to leave it up to our audience to make up their own conclusions about this really important part of the conversation, which completely and totally undermines the entire framing that Tucker Carlson wanted to construct on Fox News with 3 to 4 million people listening. He had this carefully constructed narrative that this officer, this former or this inactive DEA agent had to say. It ruined his narrative, and Tucker Carlson fell apart. That's because he has no discernible talent outside of his propagandistic narratives. The BuzzFeed report that he's talking about with Governor Whitmer is the result of a fact. The way they were able to stop this attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer in Michigan was that the FBI infiltrated the terrorist cell that was going to do this. Now, this is standard operating procedures for the FBI. And if you don't like entrapment, if you don't like people being informants to the FBI, then stop being criminal, because the people who the FBI infiltrated were actually white supremacists who had every intention of doing this. And one of the people that he was talking about in that BuzzFeed piece turned out one of the people who were organizing this, the kidnapping of Governor Whitmer, turned out to be an informant for the FBI. And I want to read directly from BuzzFeed. This is what Tucker Carlson is not telling you, alluding to, suggesting that the FBI was behind January 6th. This is from the BuzzFeed report in reference to Governor Whitmer. And here's the context. The men planned for all kinds of obstacles, but there was one that they did not anticipate. The FBI had been listening in all along. For 6 months, the Iraq War veteran who had been wearing a wire, gathering hundreds of hours of recordings. He wasn't the only one. A biker who had traveled from Wisconsin to join the group was another informant. The FBI had informants inside of these white supremacist cell groups that attempted to kidnap Governor Whitmer. Tucker Carlson knows that, but he spins it to say that it was planned by the FBI. No, it was thwarted by the FBI. White supremacists wanted to kidnap and potentially kill Governor Whitmer, just like they wanted to kidnap and potentially kill Mike Pence. And as you said, the FBI was under the control of Bill Barr, William Barr, Donald Trump appointee.
When I look at this, you had thousands of people who intentionally came to the Capitol from all over the country to cause harm. 5 people died, 540 people charged, but nobody's charged with manslaughter. Nobody's charged with murder. It frustrates me to look at the ways in which our country decides to pursue justice and not pursue justice. Yes, 540 people should be charged. A lot more than 540 people should be charged. And someone should be being held accountable for the lives that were stolen that day.
They don't see that these white supremacists who marched up the steps on January 6th actually need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. They would have thrown the book at us. I'm sorry, they would have thrown bullets, live ammunition at us as Black people. They won't even throw the books at these white supremacist terrorists who walked up the steps of the Capitol on January 6th.
And then now to see Tucker Carlson here trying to evade accountability, being used as a mouthpiece by a lot of the individuals who were there to deflect. You're deflecting accountability. You are trying to take the attention off of those who were there, those who were directly responsible for claiming the lives of 5 people. You're trying to deflect responsibility and say, oh, it was the DEA, it was the FBI. No, it wasn't. It was the individuals who decided to go there to the Capitol and storm the Capitol. And they should be held accountable for it. We should not be sitting here trying to come up with conspiracy theories of how this was something that was orchestrated by the government, which is just idiotic because the government was still under Trump. It was still orchestrated by Trump then, if that is the case.